Hi everyone, today I want to share my story about my challenge to trip to the United States. It's currently 2024 and I went to the US in 2007. At the time, I was 6 years into my career as a physiotherapist and was 27 years old. Back then, I wanted to live a life of service, and I thought that since there are limits to serving physically, it would be better to share knowledge instead. My interest in the medical field was greatly influenced by my mother, who experienced total paralysis when I was young. So that's why I studied hard to become a medical doctor. Despite giving it my all, my grade didn't meet the requirement for medical school, and I couldn't pursue that path. I lacked the courage to go through the painful experience of trying again. So I turned to physiotherapy instead. Although I felt regret at the time, it has now become a precious profession that feels like my true calling. After becoming a physiotherapist and working in a hospital, I learned about the treatment method called PNF. I completed an international course held in Korea, and I realized that this was the same method physiotherapists used to treat my mother during my middle and high school years. I wondered if this was the fate and if this was the path I was meant to take. I became fascinated by the attractive philosophy and treatment method of this exercise therapy, and I decided to go to the United States to learn directly from the source. First, let me introduce what PNF is and how it originated. In 1945, Henry Kaiser's son was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. At the time, multiple sclerosis was considered fatal and hopeless disease, so Kaiser set out to find every possible solution. He was originally a wealthy businessman who manufactured dams, highways, and ships, and his word "problems as opportunity is work close" reflect the proactive nature. He read a paper that in Washington, D.C., neurophysiologist Dr. Cabot, physiotherapist Maggie were treating multiple sclerosis and others had to treat the disease with innovative method. Kaiser immediately proposed a joint venture to invest in a startup with Sidney Garfield, who is now a co-founder of Kaiser Permanente. They later established the Kaiser Foundation Rehabilitation Center in Vallejo, California, which eventually led to the creation of what is now Kaiser Permanente Hospital. Today, this hospital employs over 230,000 staff members, making it a very large institution. Since 1947, Kaiser Permanente Hospital has treated countless patients with neurological disorders, trauma, and orthopedic issues. The hospital also offers learning opportunity for the therapists worldwide through a program called PNFschool. Physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and doctors selected based on their practical experience and interviews to receive training in Vallejo. This treatment method has expanded globally, and it's named in proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or PNF. Returning to my story, when I first met PNF, I dreamed of receiving training in its home country and become an international instructor. However, the challenge was English. To overcome the language barrier, I transferred to Knight's College to study interpretation while working at the hospital. I would buy an egg bread from a street vendor in front of the hospital and attended classes every day for 2 years without fail until I graduated. To improve my limited English, I had to make the most of my early morning since I had a child at that time. I attended the conversation classes at dawn, come rain or shine, and during my walks to and from work, I would arrive early at the hospital to clean and organize. I even kept English radio playing by my bedside while I slept. At the time, my salary was quite low to support my family, so I had to be very frugal and invested in my education. I found a way to mentally motivate myself while studying English by thinking that when my children grow up, they would also need to spend money on English classes. So I decided to invest the money in myself first. And if I could pass on that knowledge to my two children, it would be a win-win situation, right? So I comforted myself with this thought and worked hard despite the financial struggles. PNF has 5 levels. The levels above 5 are the process to become an international instructor. At the time, there were very few people in Korea who had even reached to level 5, let alone become international instructors. No Korean had completed all 5 levels directly in the United States. I felt somewhat prepared, took the application and interview exam, and fortunately I passed. The feeling I had that day is beyond the word. The Kaiser Permanent Hospital I attended in located in Vallejo, a city about 40 minutes by car from San Francisco. Between San Francisco and Vallejo, you will find Berkeley, which you may be familiar with. I remember feeling nervous. I landed at San Francisco airport, dragging a fully packed suitcase. In those days, without the smartphone, I struggled to take the bus and walk to my accommodation as directed by the school. I can't forget the fear and awkwardness I felt when I finally arrived. Having hardly ever met a foreigner before, I felt completely lost in a new world, as if I had suddenly stepped into a movie. When I opened the door, I saw a mixed blonde-haired man and woman chatting casually. They greeted me as if it was not a big deal. For me, just arriving there was a significant challenge that I had accomplished it, but I couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety about the new challenges ahead. The students at the school were assigned to live in 2-bedroom apartment with the 2 women, 2 men in each, total 4 people per apartment. The rent at the time was over $1,000, and I imagine now it's around $3,000. The carpet floor looked just like America I had seen in movies, and the distinct smell of American cleaning product added to the exotic atmosphere. In the center of the village, surrounded by a low 3-story apartment, there was a spacious outdoor swimming pool and jacuzzi to warm up in, and barbecue area, and the fitness club with the large glass windows. Coming from the rural area, it was only natural for me to feel like I had suddenly entered a movie. At the time, there were about 20 students, all physiotherapists from around the world. As I mentioned earlier, it was the first time in over 20 years that a physiotherapist from Korea had come, and I felt a strong sense of responsibility and pride as a citizen of South Korea, determined to do my best. Alongside therapists from around the world, including Brazil, the United States, Germany, Japan, Switzerland, Poland, UK, I followed a rigorous schedule that balanced the academic and therapy, gaining both knowledge and practical skill. With exam every 2 weeks and major tests every 3 months, there was a strict system that required us to return to our home country. This made me even more anxious, and I studied harder than I did in my senior year of high school. I had assumed that simply enrolling would guarantee graduation, but seeing friends who failed their exam and had to return home made me realize I couldn't show my family and supported colleagues in Korea my shortcoming. This motivated me to work tirelessly. Our schedule included a dedicated hour for research, during which I would study or read specialized medical books in the hospital library. I borrowed several books to bring back to my apartment, eager to fill my knowledge gaps, and this was a tremendous help. I thought that since I had studied hard, I would confidently apply what I learned in class to my patient. However, there was a naive misconception. I had learned superficially without a deep understanding of the human body, and my knowledge quickly proved inadequate. I faced a significant challenge not only in my physical therapy skills but also in communication due to my English skill. During classes and conversation, it felt as if I were underwater. Everything was unclear, and I often felt isolated. I remember sitting in the restroom during breaks, wiping away tears. When the first 3 months were over, about 25 international instructors gathered for an emergency meeting because of my situation. I can't forget the gloomy atmosphere as I anxiously awaited the meeting's outcome. Despite my shortcoming, I consistently completed about 3 times the assigned work, and the instructors recognized my genuine desire to learn. However, communication issues occurred during therapy sessions and classes, leading to discussion about whether I should be sent back home due to my English difficulties. The school principal held a personal meeting with me, asking me concern if I was struggling to communicate and encouraging me to share my experience. I spoke slowly, acknowledging my language limitations, but I expressed my strong determination to overcome this challenge if given a little more time. Having narrowly escaped being sent home, I committed myself even more to learning and improving. During the 1 week of vacation guaranteed before the graduation, I chose to attend physical therapy-related training at Berkeley University. I was someone who couldn't find any work-life balance. How could I waste this long break having fun after coming this far? With the mindset of wanting to learn as much as possible, I filled my time with continuous learning. Ultimately, I completed all the courses and became the first Korean to graduate. My experience of carving out a life in the United States will be remembered as one of the happiest moments of my life. I made friends who are actively working around the world, and through my encounters with various patients suffering from gunshot wounds, trauma, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, and amputations, I gained invaluable experience as a therapist. Although I still have much to learn, I developed an intermediate level of English, gained the insight to step outside my comfort zone, and cultivated a habit of occasionally looking at the global. All these challenges contributed to my self-esteem and confidence. Looking back, I realized that PNF is not a perfect treatment method and has many areas that need improvement. However, I respect and love the philosophy of each operation, which emphasizes sharing generously and taking a positive approach by focusing on what patient can do and building from there. This philosophy has greatly influenced who I am today. The operational philosophy and approach I lead at my company Bonjipizio can be seen as an indirect experience of PNF, as my instructors would agree. I have always wanted to introduce this PNF in my own voice someday. Thank you for listening. 종필 Park 2024